No, not yet, not yet. Is somebody here say that?
Hi, yes. Hi, how are you? Nice to
It's
see
nice
you.
to meet you finally.
Yeah, exactly. How are you doing?
Good. Grant is on his way here just in case something doesn't work, but
Perfect.
yeah, you should connect to get them on.
Yeah.
And they're gonna be finished in a minute.
Yeah, that sounds good. to
Yeah,
me.
we have some extra chairs if tons of people show up. It's all good. But the
Fine.
chairs are set up, it's all fine.
Yeah, I saw the internal situation. It seems cool.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's, yeah, they're like making crazy songs and it's great.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Everyone
you
seemed
hear?
mesmerized, so I couldn't, I just arrived.
Yeah, I'm Sophia, just sent
Oh,
a text to.
hey. Okay.
Hi.
I was
Your
like,
mom makes
can't get in.
Sorry,
Said I couldn't get in. Don't know what was happening.
but you made it. Okay, so it's gonna be, it should be easy. I hope the others can make it easily. Just the thing is, the room that we're in is not gonna be finished until 1:30. Here's some, like, until the half hour.
That's fine.
Yeah, we're gonna be waiting a little.
That's all good.
All right, sounds good. What, do you wanna see? We'll be here.
Oh.
So explanatory. We're at the Hawaii Convention Center.
Oh, yeah, I've been here a couple of times.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure.
See if Linda can get in.
Checking it out now.
I think we're getting recorded.
It's getting recorded, yes.
No, starting now.
It's like automatic, like I haven't done anything. It's it's the platform that's recording it.
Right.
Well, Scott is not able to come, but I think it's totally fine.
Yeah, all good.
Okay, I'll carry us in. Yes. Hi, Grant, sorry, I'm trying to reach out.
Just gonna see if I can get Linda sorted. Hold on.
Yes, please, thank you.
You should unmute. This will be the microphone. So
Yeah.
in order to be heard, you have to stand near here or speak towards this.
And when people speak, how are they going to hear?
When they speak in the room,
Is there a microphone that we can use, for instance? Would that be, is that too much hassle? Um, Suzanne, can you hear? Yeah, hi.
Still trying to get Linda in.
Suzanne, can you say one thing so we know if the,
Yes, can you hear me? Check, check.
okay, it's not working. Give me a sec.
I can hear you.
Good, I can hear you too.
Linda's bouncing all around the universe.
Bilgisayardan
trying-
geliyor mu?
My,
They are done.
yeah,
Yani
when
ses
I
nereden
fixed
geliyor
my,
daha demin?
my Zoom got fixed when I
Evet.
switched my sign in to the email. Like I signed into Zoom with the email that it was sent to, the invite was sent to.
The email was sent to her university address. Yeah, one of the okay, so people are gonna help out with this also on this end, Hemi. They'll try to gather a link, I think.
Okay, right. That's your Gmail one, eh? Right, right. I'll flick that to you. I'll see you soon. Right.
Did it work? No, okay.
Then they send it to this. I'm going to put it in the chat. Hold on. Can they send it to who can I send this to? I'll put it on
Maybe that email thread.
oh yeah.
Okay, I have a link for Linda, Hemi. I'm gonna put it on Slack for you.
Yeah.
Sorry for that garble. Did you get it?
Yeah, that's our Y1.
That's it. That's it.
Right. Right. Oh, we can start in less and less time for us.
No, you have to talk for Scott's time now too.
No, you do. You're the artist. You can talk art.
I will artfully keep talking.
Hemi, can you say something, please?
Got it.
Perfect. Amazing. Thank you. Yeah, amazing. Thanks.
Oh, he said go if you want. We'll give her a couple of seconds and see if she can get in, eh? And if not, we might as well start.
You want us to start?
Oh, are you ready?
I'm
We
ready.
can be ready.
Oh, we'll give a couple of minutes.
Yeah, we can
See if
we
she
can
can
take
go.
a couple minutes. No worries. Yeah.
Yeah, Scott's not here. That's extra 50 minutes.
Yeah, exactly. We'll be right on time.
Friday night. How I know I've settled into my university job.
It keeps trying to make her sign into Zoom. She doesn't know what's going on. Yeah, we might as well start, eh?
Is there a technical assistant who could get Linda's phone number?
Oh, is there, sorry, I didn't hear. Is there a problem still?
Yeah, so it keeps making her try to sign into Zoom. Doesn't know why.
Okay.
And she said it on Zoom, but just before. Told her to do that super technical thing. Restart her computer.
I had to do that just now.
Connect etmesi gerekiyor. Ama connect edemiyor çünkü
So
ne
she
oluyor?
tried the email address that is registered in S4S.
Yeah, is she using the address, her institutional email address?
Like she should use the email address that is registered on STL, 4S.
Yeah, but Grant gave us another link actually, which is what she was trying. Maybe this is very
Oh, the other
unfortunate.
one, I'll give you other one. It's the Linda Tuhiwai Smith at Gmail one. She's trying to log in with that.
No, can she log in with her institutional one? If
I
not,
think that's the problem.
yeah. I'm going to relog really quickly also, all right?
Yep.
I'll be here.
And it's lucky we're doing a project on tech, eh?
I love technology. I spent all day talking about AI
Today.
today. It was a whole day.
Oh, you'll be on fire then. It'll be in the center of your brain.
I know, it really is. That downstairs in my house, there's a fire going. People are eating dinner.
Yeah, I asked for help, but I don't know. We'll see. Unfortunately, no, should we give Linda's Gmail address to the organizers then, Hemi? Yeah, okay, coming.
Yeah.
And you guys should keep going. I'll try and deal with it and emailing them directly. Tell them to be on the email. So you guys keep going.
Okay, cool. All right, so she should stay on her Gmail and it's gonna work soon.
Great.
If Mm,
Okay.
yeah, sorry about that, folks, online and here. Sorry about this.
Right. If you want to start, then hopefully she'll join us by the time you finish and I finish.
I agree, actually. Are you getting this?
Yeah, you just need to full screen.
Oh, no,
Oh.
we shouldn't. Yeah, no. I'll just do like this if that's okay, because I don't know how.
Oh, go to slideshow.
Mm.
And then go to presenter view. Oh, actually, you know why? It's because you have,
Yeah,
do
exactly.
you have two screens right now?
Sorry?
Are you plugged into a projector?
Yeah.
Oh, then stop sharing and then reshare with the window with the projector's window.
Oops.
I just noticed at the bottom of Zoom, there's an AI companion.
I am unable to do this. Uh, hmm,
If you go,
presentation'a geçtiğim zaman, presentation'a geçtiğim zaman şey yapmasını istiyorum.
if you go to setup show, up there, it says setup show, you can choose. Yep, present, setup slideshow. Choose browse by an individual window. So at the very top, or hit that browse. Yep. And then when you hit OK and you present, it'll just be in a singular window. Nice.
Thanks, Suzanne, for the remote saver moment. All right, so maybe we should kick this off, eh? And hope that Linda will be able to join us. And if not, we'll do a bit more work around and but hopefully it won't come to that. So hello, everyone. Welcome. Very big apologies for the makeshiftiness of the situation. I hope you weren't too rattled. But we have time. We have time until 3:20, so I think we should be fine. So welcome to Imagining AI through Indigenous Knowledges. This is going to be a facilitated discussion. I'll just explain briefly the format, and then we will do a round of introductions. I'm going to introduce you to our amazing speakers today. And yeah, and then we're gonna do, basically what we'll do is, we're gonna talk a little, we're gonna introduce you this concept, we're gonna introduce you our research program, and we're gonna show how people are working with these ideas, and then we're gonna open it up to the floor. We want this to be really interactive, really engaged, and so, yeah, we hope that you'll have wonderful inputs, and hopefully this is gonna be curious for you too, okay? Just one thing, one disclaimer is that when you're making a comment or when you're talking about it, maybe you'll have to come up here actually, because they cannot hear and they don't have a microphone apparently somehow. So yeah, we're gonna have to, maybe that mobility will also feed into the session. That's what I'm hoping. Okay, so actually, yeah, let's introduce ourselves and then I will give a brief contextualization and then I'll give it up to our speakers. Hemi, why don't you go ahead?
Nō reira tēnā koutou I tēnei rangi, tēnei te mea tuki koutou, inoho nā ki tēnā o tētahi o tō tātai nei, kāinga nei. E mea tuki ngā whanaunga, ngā hoa o Hawaii, inoho kau ki korā, e mihi kau ki mai I tēnei whainga, tēnei whāti, no Ngāti Kahunu, Ngaitahu, Ngāti Mamo me Waitaha. Nō reira e rangatira mā tēnā koutou. Good afternoon, I believe it is here. It is here anyway, on a Saturday. Kia ora, I'm Hemi Whanga. I'm one of the co-leads for Abundant Intelligences. I come from Ngāti Kahunu, Ngaitahu, Ngāti Mamo and Waitaha in Aotearoa. Those are my tribes. And I'm a head of school at Te Pūtahi Atoi, the School of Knowledge at Massey University. Ko reira, tēnā koutou.
Great, thank you. Suzanne?
I'm Petu Washte, Takia Piki Gluoni Hawi, or Suzanne Katamachia Pikasto, Los Angeles Etaha, Nalaham Mohikaniak, Elwatie, Inawe ki Alita Kaira Chiapina, Atawe ki Dennis Kaira Chiapi, biologically Inawe ki Cynthia Friedman Chiapina, Atawe ki Mats Vigals Chiapi, Carol G. Mesteth, Na Mildred Ferio, Vichakiapi, Kaka Bill Stover, na Makpia na Gina Edwin Spigalza Vichakiapi, Oglala Hamacha, Chante Washtana Pechi Uzapikisto, Hello, my relatives. Good evening. It's Friday night here in where I am. My name is Honors Her Relatives. There's Suzanne Kite. I am from Los Angeles and I live in the Hudson Valley in New York, or Mahakaniak. I am a Oglala member, citizen of the Oglala Sioux tribe. Shake your hands with a happy heart. I am the distinguished artist in residence in studio arts and an assistant professor in Indigenous American and Indigenous Studies at Bard College and director of the Wihamli Sa'a lab. So Wopila for having me.
Great, thank you. I'll also briefly introduce myself. Hi, everyone. My name is... Wow. That was terrible. Of course, this has to happen. Sorry, technologies act out around me. This is very normal for me. My name is Zeyda. I'm from Turkey, and I'm joining you from Montreal today. I'm from Concordia University, a PhD candidate in the sociology and anthropology program. My main work is on human machine socialities, but specifically more into questions around freedom and novelty. It's a bit of a conceptual work. And in that sense, I got involved in the Abundant Intelligences program for the last 2 years, and I'm currently the research coordinator. We also have another presenter, Linda Smith, but she will be joining promptly. So maybe I will actually start, and she will introduce herself when she's presenting. Okay, so yes, imagining AI through indigenous knowledge systems. Today we are joined by these amazing speakers. Unfortunately, Scott is not able to join us today, and Jason Lewis, our co-director with Hemi, he's also unable to join. But basically, this is the baby of Jason Lewis and Hemi. And this baby is called Abundant Intelligences, which is a research program that's recently came about and is funded by the Canadian NFRF grant, which is a $23 million 6-year funding. And the SSHRC grant, also Canadian Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council grant, which is a $2.5 million research grant. These all came to be in the last spring, and we are happy to launch you into what this research program, what actually got funded. So I will read actually, because I don't want to miss out on nice articulations that you might enjoy. So, put simply, the Abundant Intelligences program imagines completely how to conceptualize, design, develop, and deploy AI technologies based on indigenous knowledge systems. Our motivation mainly comes from the fact that the mainstream AI research relies on Western rationalist epistemologies and definitions of intelligence that pretty evidently suffers from fundamental shortcomings, exclude many ways of knowing about the world, and consistently operationalize bias against non-white, non-male, and non-Western peoples. These are not sufficient foundations on which to adequately, robustly, and humanely conceptualize, much less attempt to replicate, whatever that means, intelligence. So indigenous knowledge systems provide a way to rebuild AI's epistemological foundations, transforming these tools from their current role in reinforcing colonial practices of exclusion, extraction, manipulation, and eradication into engines for increasing our care for one another and our world. And you know, the keynote sessions, if you had the chance to attend in the conference, they have emphasized this notion, the aloha aina, right? And we listen to indigenous scholars and the knowledge practitioners who have generously shared the many facets of this concept and this deeply caring and nourishing way of knowing the world. So we can think of abundant intelligences basically as another instance where we extend such framework to the research, design, and production of AI systems. So we can say that we pursue research grounded in indigenous epistemologies and protocols so as to reimagine what AI can be. And we ask these questions very broadly. How can we integrate and adapt existing advanced computational methods into indigenous knowledge systems? How can we develop new AI systems from within indigenous contexts to support the flourishing of indigenous communities? And how can the knowledge generated can help guide the development of AI generally and globally towards a more humane future? Very big ideas, obviously, and we are ready to tackle them. So indigenous knowledge systems develop through living in a long-standing relationship with place and are characterized by close observation and experimentation, protocols guiding how to engage with such knowledge, expectations of reciprocal and mutual care amongst an entire web of beings that live in that place. So indigenous knowledges reflect an understanding of intelligence different from mainstream AI research, which offers an alternative method for considering how knowledge is generated, validated, and propagated. And in accordance with this, basically, we aim to develop AI tools that embody reciprocity within the communities in which they're deployed, and in the process, generate scientific insights into significant technical challenges within mainstream AI research, and lay the groundwork for a transformative synthesis of different knowledge frameworks to underpin AI. And I mean, why abundant intelligence? Well, obviously, we love the AI that comes with it too, but the abundant intelligence, the abundant implies both diversity and knowledge practices that contribute to thriving networks of being in a particular place. These practices focus on regeneration, or living more for future generations, generosity, or enabling and encouraging sharing with the other beings in our context, and reciprocity, or emphasizing that we are in a relationship with those beings that requires that we sustain each other. Abundance signals a plethora of futures, and as well as an expansion of the narrow definitions of intelligence currently favored by dominant AI research paradigms, and to embrace the multiplicity of human and non-human intelligences. We also chose abundant to invoke imaginaries that sustain and feed everyone. Again, that Aina idea, reinforcing how the entire project is grounded in particular territories whose lands nourish us. It turns us away from capitalistic mandates, mindsets that, treat overaccumulation and scarcity as productive of economic value, and which propel practices of extraction, exploitation that are central to the project of indigenous erasure, while turning us towards a future where indigenous communities have the capacity to fashion AI that nurtures us. So abundant communities possess a cultural confidence that fosters innovation, imagination, and a joyous pursuit of new opportunities to make a better world. And yeah, our research is actually a truly interdisciplinary endeavor because it incorporates perspectives rooted in indigenous epistemologies and cultural knowledge practices, as well as physical sciences, engineering, computer sciences, humanities and social sciences, art and design disciplines. Our co-investigators include names like Manulene Mayer, who maybe you had the privilege of listening to yesterday at yesterday's keynote, Linda Tubai Smith, who will be joining us shortly, who literally wrote a book on decolonizing methodologies, as well as people like Yoshua Bengio, who also literally wrote the book on deep learning with his colleague, Erin Purwill, who is also part of our group. So the idea of just putting these, two people together, like the Manulene Mayer and Yoshua Bengio, would be actually a great endeavor on its own. Also, aside from this truly interdisciplinary group, we have substantial community engagement involving members of community organizations with expertise in integrating traditional knowledge and Western knowledge practices, building cultural and technical capacity within communities, and convening diverse stakeholders. You're seeing so many names here, but some to mention are Tehiku Media, Purple Maya, Indigenous in AI, and IDEA. So this is my brief spiel. I don't want to take too much of your time with this. We're gonna be expanding on this obviously as we go along, and I'm gonna leave it up to give it up to Hemi to give you more of this. Hemi. Sorry, Hemi, we can't hear you. Yes.
That'll be because I'm on mute. Oh, geez, I'm having one of those days. So one of the things when we were sitting down thinking about this project and conceptualizing kind of what it means for our Indigenous people, I wanted to show you this picture here, which is my marae, which I belong to in the South Island of Aotearoa. And it's very much thinking about how does AI really penetrate into communities and what does it actually mean for Indigenous communities to utilize it as a tool to connect and assist us in thinking about who we are. You spent a long time thinking about this from different perspectives. How does it work for example, for people who are very much embedded in those communities, and what potential does AI have for them in connecting to the rest of their families and relations who are overseas. So this little place here, 85% of us don't live there. We live away, and so I suppose where a lot of my initial thinking and others were saying, well, how do we connect back home? How can we use technologies? How can we use these growing technologies to assist in allowing us to not only grow our awareness of who we are, but also allow us to think about those technologies that can assist us to stay connected, to stay, I suppose, to grow our wealth in terms of our own Indigenous knowledge and our own languages. Next slide, please, Chada. So in terms of what I've been doing for the last 5 or so years, we've been digitally scanning our marae, talking to our storytellers, to our elders, and getting them to think about how do we, how do we actually share these stories with our people? And in the background, we've been working on setting up repositories, setting up Indigenous focused repositories, which allows us to establish a different type of protocols around access, around who has access to that knowledge. Is it done through genealogy? Is it done through a different mechanism? And so there's been quite a growth in that area around our conceptualizing about who can access our knowledge, why they're accessing it, and then what types of systems can our knowledge be pushed into. The next picture, please, Jada. So in 2020 was the first time, no, it might have actually been before then, pre-COVID actually, we came together as a collective and worked on a position paper with a number of us putting together think pieces, positionality around how do we actually conceptualize it from our different communities in different regions. And we set forth to, I suppose, provide some guidance around what are some of the protocols associated with artificial intelligence, which sort of pushes me on to Suzanne, and she can pick up from where I've finished.
Suzanne, do you have something to share? Should I stop sharing?
Yes, I will share. Okay,
And Linda joined us, so that's great.
great.
Yeah, Linda, just in a second, we'll ask you to introduce yourself. Thank you for holding through this.
All right, I move my boxes out of the way. So I'm Suzanne Kite. Just to give you, I have these fun graphics to show you where I live, where my folks are from. Turtle Island, and then specifically in Turtle Island, I'm Sioux or Lakota, and this is the general area that my folks live in and that I do my research in. Most specifically, the Pine Ridge Reservation, where I have relatives all over, but especially in Kyle, South Dakota, and right around a creek called No Flesh Creek, and Kyle Dam is the home of my great grandmother, whose children still, and grandchildren and great grandchildren all live still kind of around in this sort of what we call a Tioche Prae. And to be extremely specific, when I do my research, these are the people that I really turn to, work through their knowledge, their stories, especially my cousin and spiritual brother, Corey Stover, who I spend most of my time collaborating with. But I'm lucky to have get to collaborate with a lot of these relatives, which is obviously extremely important to Indigenous methodologies. So I'm an artist, first and foremost. I make art. I'm a composer, performance artist. All of my AI research is really just art making with a lot of extra verbiage. But specifically when I make work, I wanted to find a way to move away from classical composition and was pulled towards computational media through the ability to build wearable instruments. So using MIDI technology, OSC, accelerometers, Arduino, et cetera, as that access to those kind of materials changed over time. Eventually, I was making machine learning wearable interfaces that were very much drawing from the time at the beginning of my doctoral program, where I was introduced to Indigenous futurisms through Jason Lewis and Skawanati. And I made this work called Listener in 2018, which as far as I would love to be corrected, but I think it might be one of the first, at least American Indian artworks that use machine learning. I used Wekinator and some really poorly put together radio transmitters to do this performance. And it'll be performed again on November 18th at the Hessel Museum. In the process of many things happened, of course, but in the process, I became very concerned with what my family and what Lakota philosophy generally had to say about making things ethically. We use the English colloquialism good way to try to express this, but obviously it's much more complicated than that. I first kind of synthesized these concepts by thinking about Lakota Sweat Lodge, our Nipi ceremony, and our relationship with stones as a framework for thinking about how I wanted to build computational tools. This became my contributions to a few different papers, but especially our Indigenous protocols and artificial intelligence position paper. And I really see AI as just a term that's quite interchangeable with many other acts of creation, if not any act of human creation, where thinking about how we make something is always answerable by looking towards things that we already make ethically and that we do not have to reinvent creation in order to make something in a good way. So I try to combine these with research creation practices, but specifically, drawing from people who've come before me, especially Linda Smith. I want to think through Lakota, all of my interviews and time spent with Lakota practitioners, and about how specifically art making methodologies, research creation methodologies can make artificial intelligence. So in my dissertation, these were all of the research creation methodologies that I didn't do necessarily. I probably did them, but that other people did during the interviews or talked about doing during the interviews. So even though we were talking about AI, we were doing things like seeking input of our elders, creating in order to listen, singing together, harmonizing, beating, praying, resting, gifting, opening ourselves to listen to non-humans, offering medicines, telling our genealogies, interpreting our dreams, practicing patience in interpreting our dreams, protecting our artworks that were the result of our visions or dreams, speaking to non-humans, feasting our tools, et cetera, et cetera. So all of these, to me, are the groundwork for saying, okay, how am I going to make Lakota AI? Well, it has to be done through these practices. I can't go about doing it in any other way. The question I always get asked is how is that going to happen? So I'm just going to give a few examples. This is a sculpture that I made with Becky Redbow and Corey Stover. It draws from a super interesting practice to me. It's not a practice, it's a language. This is a graphic in the center by Sadie Redwing, a Lakota designer. And on the side are kind of examples of this language. And this is a Lakota visual language. And more specifically, it's a legible geometric language often used by women or people who do women's style work. And it shows a clear path of maybe a form of language or a type of semiotics that is completely does not work with concepts of natural language processing and doesn't work with processes like general adversarial networks or GAN. There's no way to write in this language or do those things through the AI tools that are being so heavily invested in. So when I look at designs made with this work, I read like a kindergartner in this language. I can read them and interpret them and figure out what they're saying. So one of the processes was telling stories in this language. And one of the things that became very clear as a methodology, a Lakota methodology, is that when we make new knowledge, if we're going to make something new, if we're going to make an AI, for example, it has to be done through amazing methodologies such as a dream to design methodology, where one has to have a vision or a dream in order to create something new. So for example, I worked with a few different, I've worked with a bunch of groups now, but I worked with a group called Third Coast Percussion, where I took their dreams, we wrote them in this language. We took their concepts and reformed them into something that was legible to make a new artwork. So yep, I'll play a little bit of this. So in there we can hear Santi Luke Witt, who is a key collaborator on some of this research, singing a song that moved directly from what we could call a vision or a dream into, or a listening beyond, into physical reality. So trying to combine all of these things. So one more example is this installation using machine learning hair braid interface, which is positioned in a room for the audience to interact with, which combines movement from sensors, the Wekinator software, and a program called Touch Designer into an interactive system. And it's, although slightly complicated in a lot of ways, it is quite a simple interface where I'll try to play a little bit of it. My question is, so I don't have time to listen to the whole thing, but they're kind of creating an interactive world where the reactions of the computer and the decisions being made by the computer affect the decisions of the audience playing the interface. So I want to kind of wrap up with some of the thoughts I had on the future of artificial intelligence, making from my perspective and obviously my family's perspective, and I cannot at all speak for any other people, especially any other Lakotas. But I can say from our perspective, when we make something new, we imagine it as a collaboration between non-humans on the earth, and the potential for their interiority, such as mined materials and stones that make up our computational materials, and a collaboration with non-humans in the non-physical realm, such as our ancestors, those who give us our dreams and visions, those who give us songs. And its artwork comes out of those listening to both sets of non-humans. So both of those things are required in order to create something new. So no matter what we do, if we don't do those in those contexts, then it absolutely won't ever be done in a good way. And each decision that we make, each little node of protocol, each Lakota research creation methodology, or whatever we want to label them, happens if we do those things and we listen to our protocols. Then that's when the artwork or the creation or the AI or the conversation that we've decided to have together can happen in a good way. And of course, while it may seem irrelevant to offer tobacco when making a new computer, to me, I understand that that one small act of protocol has a ripple effect on humans and non-humans on the earth and in the spiritual world. So my role at Bard College is director of this lab called the Wahamle Sa'a Lab, or the Dreamer Lab. And in this lab, very focused on Indigenous ontologies, of course, Lakota ontologies, most importantly to me, and communicating the potential interiority of non-human beings and understanding that as the core of how I do research. So when I'm deciding to make Lakota artificial intelligence, whatever that means, even engaging with machine learning, I know that I have to be doing that with our Indigenous methodologies, with Lakota methodologies. So some of the ways I'm thinking about this Lakota visual language is figuring out ways to either directly take my dreams and make them immediately through physical artworks, or thinking about how I can engage with important current events in Lakota country, like the start of a new uranium mine in the Black Hills, which is depicted here, or in figuring out ways that not only we can communicate our dreams and discuss our dreams and value our dreams, but also how artificial intelligence tools can be built in a good way to assist us with that, and created in a way that don't expand on the bias and issues that we do not agree with in the practices with natural language processing and other popular artificial intelligence tools. So I'll wrap up with that. It's a quote from my grandfather, Mahpia Najin, who, when I asked him about the future and if we should consider it dangerous, he told me spirits and ancestors are just there on the other side trying to help. So I feel like it's our responsibility to listen. So I think we were talking about posing some questions just broadly to the audience to talk about later. And this was the question that I came up with, which is the question of where does new knowledge come from? And in order to think through this question, there are some sub-questions, which are, who are your communities? What are those communities' values? And how can we create new tools that include those values? So, Wopila, gratitude. Thank you.
Thank you, Suzanne. That was wonderful. The claps, if you haven't heard. Linda, maybe a brief, well, an introduction of yourself, and then your presentation.
Tēnā koutou katoa. Greetings, everyone. I can see some of you sitting in a room and others on a screen. I really loved that presentation, Suzanne. Your artwork is beautiful. And it was a little bit stressful coming in. I've got technology going round and round in circles, but it's good to be here. And to, I guess I'm out of sync with where our other presenters might be, but I want to really move up a pace in terms of thinking about Indigenous knowledge and its place in AI. I'm from Aotearoa, New Zealand. I am from 3 particular tribes, Ngāti Pro on my mother's side, Ngāti Awa and Tūhourangi on my father's side. I have other tribal affiliations as well, but it's kind of hard to sustain lots of different tribal affiliations in our context, because it also means work, right? To be part of a tribe also means to be committed and to make contributions. And in Aotearoa, we take our lines of descent equally from our mums and our dads, our parents, and can move across tribes. So the key factor for us is our whakapapa, our genealogies, and there's some complexity to those because they're not just biological genealogies, they're also quite, they're also social systems, social structures, and relationships inside those. But I want to sort of now shift to talk more generally about Indigenous knowledge. I think one of the challenges of working across different Indigenous contexts and different jurisdictions and different boundaries, if you like, whether we're talking Northern Hemisphere, Southern Hemisphere, the Pacific, the Atlantic, you name it. There are millions of Indigenous peoples, right? Many of whom are no longer able to refer them to themselves as Indigenous because they live in places that don't accept that indigeneity and Indigenous peoples exist. Many of those peoples live in countries that don't recognize them for political reasons and don't allow them to exist. There are other Indigenous populations and peoples across the world who are hugely threatened in their daily lives, in their daily existence. It is dangerous to be Indigenous in certain parts of the world. And so there are many brave Indigenous peoples whose very existence is a challenge to the states that they live in and the governments who control their destinies. So when we're talking about Indigenous knowledge, we're not talking about a neutral kind of zone in which Indigenous knowledge exists, right? There are places, countries, people who simply don't accept that we exist as a category of peoples. And those are also the same people and countries and places that don't accept Indigenous peoples had knowledge, had values, had wisdom, had a deep understanding of how the world worked. And the reason it's really important to remind ourselves of that is when we're thinking about Indigenous knowledge now, and we can talk about it kind of freely in New Zealand and Australia and Canada and the US, other people can't talk about it freely, right? So the real issue then is we're talking about power, not just about Indigenous knowledge, but what it means for Indigenous knowledge to exist in a world that's not safe for it, in a world in which power relations often determine how Indigenous knowledge is even spoken about, how it's framed, and how it's able to continue to grow and for people to continue to practice their cultural knowledge practices. So the presence of technology then is a kind of interesting challenge for Indigenous knowledge, because at one level, all the Indigenous communities I've interacted with are very pragmatic. Whatever it takes to help our knowledge thrive into the future is seen as useful if it can help us do that. And people are also very practical about the fact that we need protections along the way for our knowledge. It has taken here in Aotearoa, over 100 years to kind of revitalize and bring our knowledge back. And at every turn, we just had a change of government, for example, it's exposed again, it's threatened again, it becomes fragile again. And this is why, I heard the word protocols. This is one of the reasons protocols and ethics become really important, because protocols are used as a set of practices. And I heard that, Suzanne, in your work. It's a set of practices, a set of ways to negotiate what is it that's going to occur. Is it safe? Is this a safe space for this, creation or this story or this piece of work to proceed? And there are different protocols at different levels. There are protocols within our own Indigenous settings, our tribal settings, but there are also protocols for working across languages, across genders even, across jurisdictions, and then across spaces, different kinds of spaces in which Indigenous knowledge there are protocols. And I heard that a little bit, Suzanne, in your work, when we start talking about, you know, the real and the material, or the material, and then the abstract, and then the beyond the abstract into possible worlds that we can't see, feel, touch at present, but bring into existence through creative work and through the work of technology. And at each of those spaces, there are protocols to navigate the transitions from one space to the next space. And a lot of that in our culture here in Aotearoa is about keeping us safe, keeping the space safe, and allowing the work to continue. That comes from a deep tradition of knowledge around, you know, our navigation of the Pacific, our journeys over hundreds and hundreds of years across the Pacific Ocean. So for us in Aotearoa, those are natural processes, having protocols that keep us safe. And I think what's happening in the AI and beyond world is that's a kind of natural set of practices that Indigenous contributors and participants want to continue, that these are protocols of safety and therefore also of ethics. But before I just continue on, I just want to clarify some terms, because you will note I use the term, and we use the term Indigenous knowledge. But there are other terms at work, especially in the international context, and they're quite important to know the purpose of that term, where it's come from, and its limits, as well as what it allows to happen. So internationally, in many of the sort of international protocols, if you like, for example, the World Trade Organization, the term that's used is traditional knowledge. And that's an old-fashioned term for us. It's a term that has been imposed on Indigenous peoples. And for someone like me, it's a really problematic term, right? Because the term traditional implies that it's old, it's archaic, and it's what occurred before Europeans arrived. And what that tells us is that when, you know, the arrival of colonizers who were European basically stopped all knowledge from developing further, that there was a line that was drawn between what is traditional and then what becomes real knowledge, the replacement of Indigenous traditional knowledge by real colonial, colonizing and European knowledge. So the term traditional is not a preferred term, if you like, by Indigenous scholars, because it buys into that binary of traditional knowledge versus modern knowledge, traditional knowledge versus rational scientific knowledge. But that word exists, and it exists in international agreements, and those agreements agree to protect traditional knowledge. Another important term is traditional ecological knowledge, right? And that has its own genealogy as well. It's come out of the ecological sciences, and it refers specifically to traditional environmental knowledge. And in this sense, it includes Indigenous peoples, but also peoples who've lived on their lands and waters as ordinary minority peoples, for example, or peoples who've lived in place for hundreds of years. So it doesn't just mean Indigenous. So the word Indigenous knowledge then is a word that Indigenous peoples have chosen to use. And that choice was made in the process of negotiating the Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. It's a term that became the most accepted term that different Indigenous peoples from around the world could collaborate on. Is it the best term? No, but it's the term that they all agreed could be used, and that there was something in that term that people could see a future in, and there was something in that term that they could see as being a collaborative term for working internationally. Now that's important when we start thinking about Indigenous knowledge, Indigenous rights, Indigenous peoples, Indigenous languages. So the word Indigenous starts to lift up to a sort of a more regional and a more global way of thinking about, in essence, millions of Indigenous peoples who live in their places and in their environments doing their thing and creating their own knowledge, and they may or may not even be connected to the global context, but they have their own languages and own concepts for talking about what we're talking about today. So in my world and in Hemi's world, and I think some of the others online, we have to move up and down those terms, and we have to be really clear about what it is we're thinking about, regardless of whether it's AI or whether it's a social or creative space. Language becomes very important. Language can close doors and minds. It can open minds and open doors. And it's really, I guess, the invitation of our project, just the name of it, Abundant, the concept of abundance, is really talking to, I guess, our optimism that Indigenous knowledges have abundance to contribute, right? An abundance of different ways of knowing, different ways of conceptualizing, different philosophies of being that have huge possibilities for the way we imagine the future and the way we can engage with all kinds of new futures. You know, is it about technology at one level? Yes, but it can also be way broader than that. And so I think, you know, our project has to grapple with those ideas at this conceptual level, but also at the level of practice of what some of our members are doing as artists and as scientists, and the different ways that those practices actually can come together and actually work well. So they, you know, one way you create new knowledge, right, is you irritate the hell out of a problem. It becomes irritating, so you have to scratch it. And there are different tools you use to scratch it, right? You can use scientific tools to scratch an issue, but you can use creativity to scratch that issue as well, in order to reveal something new and something that didn't quite exist like that before, that becomes the creative space. So I just want to kind of leave that there as a teaser for people. I don't really have a question. I was too stressed out trying to get online. But I'll welcome questions anyway from the audience. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Linda. That was amazing. So I think how we will proceed is, first of all, maybe just like open, like maybe comments or questions, but also maybe trying to grapple with some of the notions and maybe coming up with your own articulations. Nothing has to be super clear. This is an open discussion space. Let's think of it as such. And when you're talking, would it be okay if you approach Jen? Thank you.
Thank you very much for the presentation. I have a question for Susanna. I appreciate the fact that you have this broad consultation with your community. it's less clear to me how you translate that into a computational language. Thank you.
Hopefully by the time we're done making all these things, it'll be really clear. But right now, it's really just a proposal. I mean, I make machine learning artwork. I consult with my family and my community. I make tools in order to perform the artwork. But basically my presentation was a proposal of my interest in making tools that broadly take dreams, sleep dreams, or the science around sleep and dreaming is very, very interesting right now, and I'm curious about how we could use those tools in a specifically Lakota way. And I'm very interested by the possibilities of working with a language that is not even conceivable by a natural language processing system. So yeah, I think that one of the most interesting things to me about making alongside machine learning or using computers is how the more I use them, the stranger my questions become, and the less interested in computers they seem to be. Like, there are far deeper questions than is AI deserving of beinghood in our community. There are more, to me, there are some deeper questions at play. So yeah, I will continue to make things with the available machine learning tools, and hopefully by the end of our 4 or 5 years or so, I'll have a working demo.
Others? Yes, please, yeah.
Hi, Suzanne, I had a really specific question for you. One of the methodologies and protocols you encountered was listed as feasting one's tools. Could you elaborate on what that means? It's not something I'm familiar with. Thank you.
Yeah, it totally was an idea that Archie Perchowis, who's a Plains Cree performance artist and technologist himself, has came up with during a conversation where we were talking about all the tools we use. We were talking about making instruments and making computer art with computers, and we were talking about all these materials in his studio, and he is very passionate about protocol, and he suddenly realized that he needed to throw a feast for his cables and his microphones and his computers. And so feasting one's tools became part of it. But it also, him mentioning that it made a lot of sense, because there's a lot of thinking about tools and Western ideas of a tool versus like the way my community thinks about a tool. It's extremely different. Like, I see one of the things that's very inspiring about the way my community still makes things is if you make something and it came from a vision or a dream. 1 second. Oh, my partner wants to restart the internet. Don't. One of the interesting things that happens is that if you make something and you put a design on there that came from a dream, or you sing a song that came from a vision or a dream, then it transforms and becomes something more, something unknowably more. And it's not just a tool you use, but it's something you can communicate with and through. And that is the big link to AI for me, where we're not just making things and they don't just magically become like artificial intelligence won't just magically appear to us. It already exists. Like our tools and the materials we take from the earth are already intelligent and sacred.
Yes, please.
Hi, I'm Laura Foster. I work on questions of Indigenous knowledge and intellectual property actually in Southern Africa. And I'm wondering how much this amazing project is gonna inform similar debates and questions going on in the continent of Africa around these questions of Indigenous knowledge. Sometimes they translate and sometimes they don't, and I'm sure you've thought about it and I would love to hear about it. Thanks.
Maybe Hemi, and then maybe Linda, you would also want to say something?
I think one of the things underscoring our project is very much around, so intellectual property is very much thought about as being an individual thing. When you start looking at legislations and laws and how it's applied. Even the other day, we were looking at an agreement between Concordia, and the institutes you have to sign it to get money. So we were looking through every single line of that agreement. One of the things that kind of stood out once we were going through every line is collective intellectual property. What does it mean for the collective? Does mainstream ways of understanding how knowledge works, how knowledge is passed between intergenerational knowledge, it doesn't stack up for us. It doesn't work in the same manner. And we also were thinking very carefully about who are the guardians of that knowledge. And what does that mean? So who looks after that knowledge on behalf of the community? And I think Linda mentioned a number of times around that kind of concept about traditional knowledge and the different spheres in which those terms actually play out in, and then how they are applied through law and legislation. So we have a huge component of our project that we will be looking at each of those kinds of concepts: intellectual property, collective property, what it actually means for communities and the way that they can apply it to different technologies. One thing that we didn't mention at the beginning, this is very much, the whole project is based around creating new capacity for young scholars, for students, for postdocs. A large proportion of our funding will go towards creating a lot more Indigenous voices in particular spaces and places, and around legislation and around the ways that we can inform across our network from Canada, from the United States, Hawaii, Australia, Aotearoa, the way that we can inform each other about the way that different governments and different legislation is applied into those spaces. So not sure how that circles across to Africa, but I'm sure over the next 5-6 years and longer, we will definitely be looking at, and we are going to look at, what those copyright. If you have a look at, for example, Suzanne's work, the work that inspires her work, this stuff has been there for eons. The way that language has been created to do particular designs, and then how that is being taken by people who have no understanding of how to interpret it and who are not Indigenous, and then sold. So all these things are things that we will be working on and thinking about. How's that view, Linda?
I'll come at it a little bit differently because I think I alluded to that at the beginning of my talk. It's, Indigenous peoples are essentially located all around the world, and one of the definitions of Indigenous peoples is that we are considered minorities in our own lands, and that, we have been colonized by European colonization from the 16th century. 17th century onwards. And I guess one of the impacts of that colonialism and colonization has been the carving up of the world in particular ways, the imposition of territorial borders that has created, modern nation states that has split peoples in half. So, half an Indigenous community and language community on one side of the border and the other half on the other side. And over time, those become realities. Indigenous identities also have been legislated by different governments. Every government that has an Indigenous peoples within its borders has legislation that defines who they are, who they can be, where they are, where they're from, what their history is. And, much of the 20th and 21st century has been the pushback by Indigenous peoples to become self-defining, that being able to define ourselves as a fundamental of exercise of sovereignty and self-determination. So I sort of put that there as a background, because what it means is for us here in this space, we're speaking English to primarily, English conference context. And it means that there are others not in the room. There are other groups not represented. And there are other peoples, therefore, whose contribution and whose knowledge is not heard or is not visible in these generally Western academic spaces. And that includes, much of Africa, but also Asia, Latin America, parts of the Pacific. And, if AI is to do anything useful for Indigenous rights, one of the things that it ought to be able to do is to be the great connector, to be able to connect peoples, right? To be able to connect languages, different ways of knowing, different philosophies, different concepts. I mean, languages themselves, the world's languages are so diverse. And that diversity is really important when we're thinking about futures and the future survival of human beings. And, hopefully out of this project, we'll be able to create the kind of conversational platforms that allow different Indigenous communities to engage from where they are. I mean, there's also a protocol about how to engage, when people are ready to engage, what the politics of engagement are. And that's, I'm just talking about within our Indigenous world, let alone trying to engage with the non-Indigenous world.
Yes, please. No worries.
Aloha, hi, I'm Tara, from UH Manoa, actually. And I mean, Linda, one, just thank you all for sharing, because my brain is swirling a little bit. So I'm gonna try to be, I don't know, say something that makes sense of question here. But of all the pieces and parts that you're playing with at the same time, so I play a lot in this framework that I made up just because the narrative of STEM bugs me. So then when you say like, there's a problem, you bug it and you scratch, I just, so I play this framework called STEM squared. And one of its fundamental truths is that it's transdisciplinary in nature, that none of the silos we've created actually exist. And so you're meant to function across all of those silos. And I feel like just even in your slides in this small snippet of the very little I understand of the work you're doing right now, I feel like you're doing that. And I'd love to understand how maybe you're navigating that. Like, and it's really to all of you. How do you navigate across all the spaces and time zones, but the languages in individual ways of knowing and processing and understanding? I mean, just even getting people in the math department to talk to me as an educator in the education department is its own challenge, but you have this extraordinarily, this web happening, that I'd love to understand a little bit more how you're navigating, because I'm fascinated and boggled. So just mahalo nui.
It's all
Maybe-
you, Hemi. That's Hemi for sure.
Okay, so the brainchild of this is definitely Jason. And a lot of this potentially stems from, he has a degree in philosophy. He is a creative, and he is also someone who does computer science. And then so I suppose the whole idea about working across those disciplines has never been an issue for Jason, nor for the rest of us. We've had to always work. So for me, one of the big things that we both said to each other at the beginning, and we all said, we want to work with people who want to work with us. You know, that I'm going to say it, we don't want to work with dicks. And if they don't want to talk to us and they don't want to play in our sandpit, fine. But if you do want to play, these are our terms of engagement. This is what we want to create. And, you know, like you say, that it's really difficult to go to talk to people in mathematics. It's not. No. You just have to walk across campus and talk to them. You just have to reach out to the right people that you want to work with. We've been working in institutes for decades now where this so-called siloing of knowledges has always been something that we've had to work against and to break down. Even in my own university and Linda's as well, the sciences and the way that they were put on a pedestal, and then the way that they dealt with our knowledges and the way that they treated our knowledges and treated our communities, these were things that we are extremely uncomfortable with. So we just said to each other, let's work with a group of people that we want to work with, and that there's a common goal, and it is to make things better. And if you don't want to make things better, if you want to cause problems, then don't come. We don't want to work with you. We have a lot of non-Indigenous that we will be working with, and they have to be there because we don't have any capacity in particular areas. And like, I suppose, if Jason was here, he'd say something like, we're here to look at something that is going to be the next, well, colonizer for us. Artificial intelligence in terms of how it would affect our communities around employment, around how it might be used, around who's got power over particular aspects of that. That is a real threat to us. However, if we're not part of the conversation, we're not part of making this work across disciplines, across nations, across the world, then, you know, these types of discussions will never happen. So, I don't know. It was a great idea. We went for it, and we put together a fantastic team. But these are all people we know and trust, and communities are expecting us to come to them with the right people, with the right tools, with the right mindsets. And we don't want to unleash scientists into our communities where I think Linda actually says it quite well. You know, research has been used against Indigenous communities for centuries as a colonial construct, as a colonial tool. And we don't want artificial intelligence to be the next one that comes along and wipes us out in terms of our knowledges, our languages, our culture. We have to be part of the conversation. We have to be wary of how people will apply it, and how they will apply it. So I don't know, there's no great one answer, a real clear one, but you know, for us, it's who wants to be on board, get on board. If we don't want you on board, then we won't invite you. It's pretty simple.
Yeah,
And
and
that's
maybe
what-
Yeah, and maybe
Okay.
one more thing could be because this is obviously a big question, like how do we bring together these different disciplines? And one, of course, this is something we reflected on, which is like the first 2 years of the program is basically simply devoted to listening to each other. It's all about coming together in regular meetings or meeting around, like formulating different frameworks, different IP conversations, and sorting things out, developing languages. Like Linda said, language is basically like how we're going to be thinking things through. So we need to establish those kind of unspoken codes that develop between people who regularly connect with one another, right? So, and like Hemi said, yeah, the community aspect is going to be like people actually relate to each other in this program. It's not just about let's come together, do something and like get off, you know?
And I think the other thing, Chada, as well, it's sort of like, you know, if you've worked for someone for 20 years, you know them really well. And a lot of these are not just new relationships. So in terms of working with our communities, yeah, I tell scientists that, for example, it takes decades to form trust. And forming trust for a lot of the scientists, a lot of the computer scientists, they've never been taught how to do that. They've never been trained how to create trust within our communities. And we trust everyone who's on this project. And then so we've got cultural advisors, we've got technical advisors. But the first 2 years, as Jada said, it's about creating that conversation around how do we trust each other? How do we trust each other with looking at, you know, do I trust my relation in Hawaii to look to run a particular program across my language? And stuff like that. So the first 2 years is concentrating on formulating and working across different disciplines to actually, how exciting would it be to put a computer scientist, an artist, an Indigenous scholar, our community leader, our communities together in a room and say, what do you want? Let's do something. That's what we're really here about. It's the first time, I think, that I've been part of a project which has gone this scale, you know, looking at this scale across different parts of the world, but that's where the real, that's why we called it abundant. It's not going to be informed by one type of knowledge that has always been put to the forefront. That's why we have artists, computer programmers, community leaders. We've also got a huge program around some internships where we'll push different students across the world to learn from the world leaders in this area. Yeah.
Great. Yes, please.
Hi, my name is Kiriaki. Fascinating topic, project. Can't wait to see. Did I understand correctly? You're in the 3rd year of the project now? Oh, it's the 1st year. Okay. No, because I was wondering, you asked the question of that you've had conversations about what do you want, and whether in your group discussions already you have some kind of desired kind of, you know, what are your desired futures of what does it look like to have an Indigenous AI or kind of informed by Indigenous epistemologies? Because I'm working about future of knowledge making practices, future of universities, and I also ask this question, like, what would a university of the future, a utopian, let's say, that materializes Indigenous epistemologies look like? Or in your case also, like, what does the AI, like in a desired future, an Indigenous future, look like materialized? I don't know if you had this conversation yet, or you're planning to have it, but visions of the future with, if your project becomes successful, what would that look like? Thank you.
I'll say that what's been clear to me, you know, since we started doing this conversation in 2018, is that it looks like extremely different for every single community and possibly every single village and possibly every single family. And so to me, the utopian possibility is that we all have the capacity to decide that for ourselves and decide how our data is being used, how our knowledge is being wielded, how it's being contained, how it's being shared, all, and that the possibilities of what these technologies that rapidly change offer, we can respond with rapidly changing creative explorations and protective decision making about that happening. So the dream is that we have the capacity to make those decisions in the extremely hyper local ways that we want to, so that there is no indigenous in AI. There is tools that my family uses, tools that other families use. The you know, pan-Indianism, as we call it in North America, is a political tool in order to reach our political desires that we and needs. But in our lived realities is that is of extreme diversity. So yeah, the dream is that it looks different for everyone. So while I personally really want a tool that defies no ability to engage with my dreams, then of one village over, that is not okay. And that's okay. What some people want to build AI elders for their tribe. My people do not want that, so we don't have to have it. So I think that's what I mean by extreme diversity.
I think if I add to that the vision, what does anything look like that's good for us look like, as opposed to, you know, things that we know are not good for us? So I think it has to be non-extractive. It has to be, you know, something that people can contribute to and draw from. But it's not a system that's just going to be like a vacuum cleaner that sucks up all Indigenous knowledge and then sort of spits out some generic, you know, Indigenous thing. That our diversity is essential to the integrity and authenticity of our knowledge. It's in the diversity of it, not the homogenization of it. So that means that not only it can't be extractive, it can't be homogenizing. And another word you might use for homogenizing, it can't be colonizing of ourselves and others. So therefore it has to be sort of decolonizing in an active way. It also, I think, needs to enable a realization of self-determination. And I'm thinking about this not just politically, but intellectually, creatively, socially, emotionally, that it has this full spectrum of, you know, of being able to do that. I think there's a generosity component. You know, we tend not to think of technology as maybe being generous, but it can be generous. All right, it's and this gets back to the power question and to what sort of Hemi was talking about. In whose hands, you know, are the decisions made, and in whose hands is power located? I mean, I think those are really important philosophical questions, sociological questions that are important for this study. And I think the history, our history in Aotearoa of take-up of technology is really, when you break it down, our people don't fear technology per se. They fear the people who wield it to cause harm. And we have a history of quite quick adaptation when we get access, And one of the fun things I like about watching our communities is how very quickly they can indigenize all these spaces. All right, they can make it work for them if they have the access and the power to do that. So to me, there are some constructs we can put about what we can put out there about what the future should look like and what it shouldn't look like.
Good. Maybe people online, we never gave you guys a chance. If anyone wants to also comment or ask questions. And if not, the room too, of course. Yes, please.
Hi, Daniela from CSIRO, Australia's National Science Agency. I'm wondering, what are the governance arrangements to really support the coexistence of these multiple knowledge systems? So how the project's planning to support different ways of making decisions and how power will be distributed?
Oh, here we go. So it works on a pod system. So every pod, so for example, a pod may be around a community cluster, maybe a country cluster, and each of those areas has their own autonomy in the types of projects and decisions that they would like to undertake. For example, I know in Hawaii, they are looking at soil and bringing together a very diverse group of individuals to look at that particular problem for them. In Aotearoa, we have a group of people and we will grow that group, and we haven't even decided on exactly what we would look at the moment. We have some ideas. We know that'll be underscored by languages, in particular natural NLPs. We do some pretty fantastic work here down this area of the world around using those particular tools to assist with, I suppose, language revitalization and the language revitalization agenda. So it's very much community-based with pod levels, and we have a steering group that has representation from each of the pods, as well as the institutes as well. We have other committees that are tasked with establishing processes and protocols in terms of how we work together as a collective, what type of sharing benefits there are, how do we approach the financial stuff. So a typical structure where I suppose we want everyone to have autonomy, all the way down to individuals if they choose to do so. And also there is a process for inviting others into our circle. So it's a normal kind of structure, but it's quite a fluid one in which it's run out of Concordia University as a funding agency. However, there is a lot of autonomy at different levels in terms of how we work together and across the project. That might do. Do you want any more? I can give you more, but
There's a nod. Maybe we have like time for one more question or comment. People online. Otherwise, I would like to thank you, our speakers. Maybe a round of applause for them to join us from all around the world. And thank you to all as well for taking the time, bringing your precious minds and joining the conversation. We hope to share again in the next year's forest, and maybe we'll have more answers to your questions. So thanks.
thank you, everyone. Thank you for listening. And thank you, Linda, for finally getting on. Thank you, Jada. Safe travels.
Take care.